Aphorism 268. The other exotic plants, barks, seeds, and roots that cannot be obtained in the fresh state, the sensible practitioner will never take in the pulverized form on trust, but will first convince himself of their genuineness in their crude entire state before making any medicinal employment of them. Explanation. In this aphorism, Dr. Henneman has given idea about dry vegetable substances, the other exotic plants, barks, seeds, and roots that cannot be obtained in the fresh state should be obtained in the form in which there is genuineness of their quality in the crude state. The sensible physician will never take in the powder or crushed form on trust of someone. He will not compromise with the quality of its crude state. After security about its genuine quality in its crude state, he will employ the medicines. Footnote 145. In order to preserve them in the form of powder, a precaution is requisite that has hitherto been usually neglected by druggists, and hence powders, even of well dried animal and vegetable substances, could not be preserved uninjured even in well corked bottle. The entire crude vegetable substances, though perfectly dry, yet contain as an indispensable condition of the cohesion of their texture a certain quantity of moisture, which does not indeed prevent the unpulverized drug from remaining in as state as is requisite to preserve it from corruption, but which is quite too much for the finely pulverized state. The animal or vegetable substance, which in its entire state was perfectly dry, furnishes, therefore, when finally pulverized, a somewhat moist powder which, without rapidly becoming spoiled and moldy, can yet not be preserved in corked bottle if not previously freed from this superfluous moisture. This is best effected by spreading out the powder in a flat in saucer with a raised edge, which floats in a vessel full of boiling water, that is, a water bath, and by means of steaming it about, drying it to such a degree that all the small atoms of it no longer stick together in lumps, but, like dry fine sand, are easily separated from each other and are readily converted into dust. In this dry state, the fine powders may be kept forever uninjured in well corked and sealed bottles in all their original complete medicinal power without ever being injured by mites or mold, and they are best preserved when the bottles are kept protected from daylight in covered boxes, chests, cases, if not shut up in air tight vessels, and not preserved from the access of the light of the sun and day. All animal and vegetable substances in time gradually lose their medicinal power more and more, even in the entire state, but still more in the form of powder. Explanation of footnote 145. In order to preserve drug substances in powder form, a preparation is required. This generally has been neglected by druggists. Because of this negligence, powder form of well-dried animal and vegetable substances could not be preserved uninjured even in well-corked bottles. The entire crude vegetable substances, though perfectly dried, certain quantity of moisture remains inside, so powder sticks together, form small balls, and in such a form it cannot be dispensed. This moisture prevents the powder to remain in as dry a state as it is required to preserve it. The animal and vegetable substances, which in its entire state was perfectly dry, means leaves, roots, are well dried. But when they are finally chopped to powder form, some amount of moisture left behind, so it cannot be preserved in cork bottles if it is not freed from this superfluous moisture. The best method to dry it out, spread out powder in flat tin saucer with a raised edge which floats in a vessel full of boiling water. Stir it about and dry it out to such a degree that all small atoms of it becomes dry fine sand, and it do not stick together to form lumps, and all atoms can be easily separated from each other and can be readily converted into dust. In complete dry state, the fine powder may be kept forever uninjured in well corked and sealed bottles with all their original complete medicinal power without being injured by mites or mold, and are best preserved when the bottles are kept protected from the daylight, for that should be kept in covered boxes cases. If these animal and vegetable substances are not stored in airtight vessels and not preserved from the exposure of the sunlight, they gradually lose their medicinal power more and more, even in entire state, but still more in the form of powders.